doing the like season reviews of what we can talking through the Transformers, the original Transformers show, and also Beast Wars and maybe some of the others. But I thought it'd be fair to actually talk about my history with Transformers, and I have a mix, kind of a mix of Transformers shows that I would initially watch when I was younger, and that included, obviously, without much, well, I suppose fairly obviously, I watched the original G1 cartoon. I didn't watch every episode when I was younger. I watched specifically or random episodes from all 3 seasons at random points in time, basically whenever they were being shown on TV. Not so much in any kind of order, and I've since bought this DVD and watched the show. I also added to the collection the movie. This is the 20th anniversary edition. Given the fact that it's covered in Korean, I'm going to assume it's probably not an official 20th anniversary version, but it works. And I also bought the 30th anniversary edition on a DVD. I also do have an Australian version on Blu-ray as well. And obviously my love for Transformers doesn't just extend to the original show and the movie, it also extends to some of the toy lines. Like I bought some of the toys, and I have also bought other toy lines like Takara's Masterpiece toy line. This is currently the only Masterpiece toy I have. It's a hot rod. And I have also got in my collection the Japanese shows, all 3 of them. I don't have any of the Beast Wars anime. They just aren't released, which is very annoying. I have a volume of Beast Wars, a volume of Beast Machines, a volume of Transformers Animated. Yeah, so I also have Robots in Disguise. I have also been obviously the cartoons and the toys. They're not the only media of Transformers and movies. They're also the comics. This is specifically the Marvel UK comics. I do have the American comics calendar, but this is the only one I felt like grabbing. So I also have the Star Wars Transformers, and these aren't new Star Wars ones. These are old ones. These are from like the early 2000s. So sometime around the prequel trilogy, possibly even just shortly after the prequel trilogy had wrapped up, these were being made. I have Millennium Falcon. This one splits into Han Solo and Chewbacca. It did come with like mini Han Solo and Chewbacca. Like Chewbacca would go in there and Han Solo would go in here. But I have since lost those little mini figures, so not much I can do about that, sadly. And I also have a grip on this guy. I also have a Snowspeeder Luke Skywalker Transformer. He's a bit of a mess right now. I've also apparently lost a weapon. Oh no, it's right there. Yeah, he's yeah, this one also came. This one's from the same line as this Millennium Falcon. This one also had like a mini Luke Skywalker, or a mini figure, a little tiny figure that was Luke. And yeah, I've also lost him as well. Yeah, he would go right there in the cockpit, which that is a shame. I'm pretty sure I still have the instructions for these two. I'll throw you over there. yeah, so that is my little introduction to this stream before the actual, like, before we actually, or before the stream starts, and to kind of give you an idea of my history with this franchise. Of course, I have like a whole bunch of Transformers on this shelf back here, like some down here, some up here, one right there, a couple up there, but you can't see them. Oh, before I forget, I also nearly forgot about this. I also have Transformers video games. I've got Devastation. This one is actually in continuity with the G1 cartoon. It takes place before the movie, in between the movie and the second season. That game, which, despite the continuity it's connected to, this game's not really that bad. It's actually kind of fun to play. And then War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron. These aren't the only Transformers games I have. I also have one on PS2 somewhere in this pile. Yes, somewhere in this pile of PS2 games here. I have the Armada game. Okay. I also have some of the new Transformers, like Earthrise Starscream. Yeah, they're just all over my desk, all over here over these shelves, all over the those like shelves up there. There's got some there, one over there. Yeah, they're literally everywhere, all over my room and on every available space they can be on, basically. Welcome, Autobots and Decepticons. My name is Matthew Flynn, the Gladiator of Kaon, and with me today is Troy Pacelli, also known as Karton the Klingon Cleric. Hello, Troy.
Hello, how are you today?
Now, that introduction you just saw, I have now realized I didn't properly edit. I only partially edited that. I probably should have watched that beforehand and made sure.
No, it's a great setup, though.
Yeah. My collection has actually been added to since I made that.
I would imagine. I did have a question, though, that sprang to mind from that. You mentioned having both the British and the American Marvel comics. Is there some overlap there, or are they completely separate storylines?
That's kind of a mix, because the UK comics, because obviously UK comics are made weekly, whereas over in America they're made monthly. What would happen is Marvel UK would receive the American issues, and then they would break them up into smaller stories to publish them weekly. And then they realized the amount of issues we're getting and splitting isn't quite enough to fill out the amount of time we have. So they decided, you know what, let's just make our own original stories. So they would, after the first 4-issue miniseries from the American comics was brought over, split into smaller weekly comics, then what happened is the UK offices started producing their own content to kind of fit in between the American issues that they were getting. So you basically had like various UK exclusive stories that kind of tie into and fit between the American issues they were getting at the time. Now that makes it sound like the UK and US storylines like tie together and, you know, like really like interlock with each other, but that is only partially like that. Because as you get later on in the UK run, Simon Furman, who was writing the UK comics, would transfer over to writing the American comics. So he was writing both sides at the same time. And you'd think that would mean that the comics were like really tied together, like had a like really strong connection because it's the same writer. What ended up happening is Simon Furman got really tired of doing both sides. So he's just like, yeah, screw it. I'll just have the UK comics follow whatever story I want them to and not really worry about connecting them.
That actually sounds like it'd be more difficult than, just doing one and breaking it up. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I feel like that means he had to do two completely separate storylines and keep them straight.
I haven't read much of the later UK Marvel comics,
Mm-hmm.
mostly because the later UK comics haven't been printed too much.
Yeah.
Because if I turn my camera on, I have also moved my stuff around. This right here is my door to my room that
Mm-hmm.
I am not touching because I'm touching the wall. I'm not far enough back. There we go.
Yeah.
If I just quickly, I've also done this so I can easily move around because it's plugged into the side of the TV right here.
Yeah.
Because before it was on, this TV was here, and I would have to have the wire like here, and I'd be like finding it difficult to pull away. But with this here, I can easily move around now.
Yeah.
That's specifically the reason I made that choice. So, as you saw, the UK trades that IDW put out only go to 5 volumes. There was intending to be a 6th volume that covers the Time Wars, but the person who was in charge of it, I think either he was fired or he quit or something like that. Something happened behind the scenes that caused the guy who was in charge of these classics UK collections, it caused him to just give up and stop doing them. So that 6th volume that was intended just was cancelled. Although, annoyingly enough, you can still find it available on Amazon. It's just not being sold. So, yeah, here's the Classics UK. This is the volume 1.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially what would happen is the UK exclusive stories would be made in a weekly format. Obviously, this collects them as one big story, those individual issues as one big story rather than as like individuals. I think, if I find the page, because these they don't include the reprints of the US issues because there's no need for that because there's the collections because there's a separate collection for the US issues.
Mm-hmm.
So this only has the UK content. This does not have any of the US content in it. Fine. Yeah, so the different stories, they'll be classified in parts. So the first story is called Man of Iron, which I think ties into the first 2 issues of the comic. And I'm going back. Yeah, so it will either say part or chapter. Like this page, it says right there, chapter 2. It wasn't the page I was intending to go on, but it's the page I found. So all the UK stories will be like that. They'll be like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. However many were printed in, well, I think it was 4 in a week. So the later UK comics, there are the Definitive G1 collection that has all of the UK comics in it. Although that's a UK exclusive thing. I think you can possibly order that online. You might have to have it imported though. But the UK, the only other way of getting the UK story, the later UK stories, is through these put out by Titan Books or Titan Comics. And as you can see, this is quite big.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it doesn't go on my shelf. I have to lay it on top of the others.
Yeah.
Let me grab this one. So this one's normal sized.
Right.
And that's how big they
Yeah.
are. So
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so I've got that. I think if I do that, then you can see how big this thing is.
Yeah.
That's kind of wrong. I was expecting it to be smaller than that, but when it came here, it was massive and doesn't actually fit on my shelf. Like these shelves are not big and not wide enough to actually for them to sit in.
Sure.
And it's like clear a space and have it angled like that, which I don't want because I'll warp the pages. Okay. So now that the tangent is over, that opening tangent. Actually, before we go any further, do you remember anything of what we talked about in the previous streams that we did?
I mean, yeah, I remember the sweeping points, not the fine points.
Okay, because I remember we talked about female Transformers. I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
We also talked about what was it? I know I did like an overview of just like the franchise as a whole. Like G1 stuff, and
Sure.
Beast Wars came out, and then I did an overview of different things that have come out over the years.
And I may be
Also,
misremembering whether it was here or on Culture Fortress, but I remember a great deal of talk about the multiverse of the Transformers.
I think I have talked about the multiverse here and there on previous streams that we did,
Mm-hmm.
but we've never gone deep into it and actually talked about it. I've mentioned bits and pieces on Culture Fortress, the different
Mm-hmm.
Culture Fortress streams. So
That was a little complex, that particular multiverse aspect of the Transformers.
yeah, it's kind of weird because Hasbro themselves,
Mm-hmm.
they don't really recognize, well, they don't not necessarily recognize, but they don't really pay much attention to the storylines going on in the multiverse and the collectors club stuff.
Mm-hmm. I would
But
imagine they probably don't pay any attention to any aspect of Transformers that they don't have a direct license to make money off of.
yeah, I mean, they basically treat any kind of instance of any instance of the multiverse being mentioned or being a part of a story,
Mm-hmm.
instead of following the rules that have been set up in the collectors club, they instead just go, do our own thing.
Yeah,
Like with Cyberverse, that has the multiverse in it, but not. It doesn't follow the rules of the collectors club.
sure.
It just does its own thing with the multiverse. Although, given that the Cyberverse came out after the Shroud, that's technically it's okay for it to do that because the Shroud happened before that.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I'll go into what the Shroud is a little bit later. Yeah, the Shroud's kind of a complicated and annoying thing.
Might have to explain a phrase that you've mentioned a couple times there, the collectors club. The nomenclature implies one thing, but I'm guessing it's not what I'm
Yeah.
thinking.
Okay, I just missed all of that.
Oh yeah, I saw there was a hiccup on the line. I might need some explanation of the collectors club. That particular phrase. From the context, it doesn't seem to match up with what it seems to mean based on the nomenclature. What I would think a collectors club means. So, what is the collectors club?
Okay, the Collectors Club is a monthly magazine that was made specifically for the Transformers convention BotCon, and it
Okay,
ran
so it was
from
put out by or in relationship with BotCon.
yes,
And are
which
they?
itself is authorized by Hasbro.
They're authorized, but they're a separate entity.
Yes,
Okay. Okay.
although technically BotCon isn't a thing anymore.
Okay.
That ended in 2016.
Okay.
Yeah. Since then, Hasbro has been doing the conventions or convention-related stuff themselves,
Right.
and there hasn't been any accompanying convention fiction
Right.
either. Because basically, what the Collectors Club did is they released monthly issues or magazine issues that on the first half of them had all kinds of details about the franchise, like interviews with creators and people working on the different shows at the specific time they were coming out and
Sure.
giving insights and that sort of thing. The kind of things that hardcore fans would want to know about. And then the other half is a comic book or part of a comic book story that is told in basically every issue of the magazine.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff comes from the Collectors Club magazine. There was also an accompanying comic called Transformers Timelines that was also running here and there throughout the run or throughout the whole release of the Collectors Club magazines itself. We'd have, although not every issue would come out one after another, sometimes they'd be months apart from each other or possibly years.
Mm-hmm.
There was also because there are two different companies that made comics and stories for the convention or for the BotCon convention. There was 3H Productions, were the first guys to make, were the first company to make convention exclusive comics, and then the second was Fun Publication, and you would sporadically see characters from other storylines and other shows make appearances.
Mm-hmm.
Like how the Optimus Prime of the 2001 Robots in Disguise cartoon would appear in some of the early stories. Okay, if I share the page. Yeah, let's do it like this. Okay, there we go, we can see it. Okay, so can you see that clearly enough?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's one there that probably grabs your attention. I mean, I'm assuming I'm referring to the referring to one that you know.
Well, I mean, you know, I'm guessing that I'm understanding the titles of these. So when I see Alpha Cartoon, I assume that's the old cartoon that I remember.
Okay, I'll explain what this is.
Okay.
So
I also noticed GoBots doesn't seem to be a Transformers thing.
oh, there is a reason for that.
Okay.
There was also a reason there's there twice as well.
Oh yeah.
There is a reason for that, which I'll explain. Okay, so the Transformers multiverse is broken up into what is called clusters or universal clusters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what these are on the side here with all the names, you know, like G1, 2001
Sure.
Robots in Disguise, Unicron Trilogy, all these on this right side. So I think these first six at the top are the main clusters, and then all these others are like minor clusters.
Sure.
So, and they basically, that's where where specific stories or comics or cartoons are located. So this one at the top, the Primax cluster, everything G1 is in that cluster. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything in the same cluster is connected to each other, but like they're like a shared theme or something similar about them. So this you would have the G1 cartoon, the Marvel comic, and then you would have also all of the splinter timelines, like the UK comics would be a splinter timeline of the Marvel comic, and you would have reboots like Dreamwave and IDW's comics would be in this cluster, and you'd have all these other ones like Robots in Disguise or Viron cluster. That's Robots in Disguise, or the 2001 show. I think that cartoon is the only thing in that cluster, so it's a very small cluster.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the Primax cluster is the biggest because it has so much there. And you have like Unicron Trilogy, the Oryx cluster, Tyran cluster is the Bayverse. It's not exclusively the Bayverse. The Bumblebee movie is in that cluster as well. I've just said Bayverse because it's easy to understand it that way. Yeah, you have Malgus cluster, Transformers Animated, the Union cluster. That's all of the aligned continuity stuff, which I have talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
Fornax is all the Creo Transformers stuff. I think I'm pronouncing this right. Ioka enough. The Transformers wiki mentions this cluster as all the forgettable merchandise. I don't know if that's actually the case, but I've just gone with side merchandise because that explains it better.
Sure, that makes sense.
I would also point out the Transformers. I would also point out the Transformers wiki is only so helpful in this regard. They definitely like to look down on stuff like this. Whether it's canon or not, they look down on this deeper information because they're more focused on the franchise being a goofy 80s cartoon. Nexus cluster, that's actually a really important one because that's the home of the Transtech, they're the ones who are monitoring the multiverse and keeping records of everything. Also, all this like clusters and this identification of different universes is actually called the transtech notation. So they're the ones that come up with how this all is laid out. I do have some example images to make it a little easier to understand. This one you probably noticed, the quadruple cluster is the real world. I don't know if... Oh, too much.
Yeah.
There. Yeah, so...
Yep.
Right there. Quadruple cluster, the real world. Each of these clusters have different levels of how easy or difficult it is to travel from one universe to another. As you can imagine, the quadruple cluster has incredibly strong barriers and is very difficult to get to, given that it's the real world. I think the Union cluster is also one that has very strong borders between other universes. Okay, and then here we get to this cluster, which I, for the life of me, cannot pronounce. I don't know if that cluster was named as a joke or if they intentionally came up with this name. I don't think my mouse is even pointing at the right thing. Or actually, no, my mouse on my screen is pointing at the right thing. On the stream, I don't think it is.
Yeah, is it the one next to the GoBots?
Yeah, this one right. Yes. It's like yes, yeast.
Yairist? Yairist?
I don't know if that was meant as a joke. I don't know
who
came up with the name for that cluster, whether it was a joke thing. But yeah, this one is so this cluster is the home of the GoBots. If I remember. Yeah, okay, so that cluster is the Hasbro GoBots. While this second cluster down here that also says GoBots, you know, the one that doesn't have a hyphen in the middle of Go and Bots.
Right.
That one is the original GoBots cartoon, you know, Challenger the GoBots, the non-Hasbro one. Yeah, for some reason, the Hasbro version of GoBots and the non-Hasbro version of GoBots are two separate clusters rather than one. I don't know why. This one right here, the Simon cluster, which is comprised of all of Takara's non-Transformers brands, like Diaclone and Zoids. That's also the oldest cluster in the multiverse, because Zoids technically came out before Transformers, so that one is actually an older cluster. Because I believe before, the Primax cluster up here at the top was considered to be the oldest before everyone discovered that the Simon cluster exists in this multiverse. Here's the one I was referring to about, you would probably notice, the Lucas cluster containing the Star Wars Transformers.
Yeah, I didn't catch that because I was focused on the descriptions. I didn't realize the names were descriptive. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, some of these require a bit of explanation, and some of them are relatively self-explanatory.
Sure.
Yeah, that one is interestingly enough, the Lucas cluster doesn't have any accompanying fiction with it. It's the only fiction associated with the Transformers Star Wars is the bios on the back of the toys boxes.
Gotcha.
And the bios themselves literally just describe the 6 Star Wars movies, except everyone has transforming jets and stuff, or everyone's fighting the war.
That would make a very interesting mental gymnastics to imagine what that alternate reality would be like.
Yeah, the Star Wars movies play out exactly the same as they do in the actual movies, but everyone has like big mechs that turn into their vehicles. I feel like that would actually affect the plot of the movies, but that's the story. That's the only story we got for that particular cluster. Rovio, I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but I'm going to continue anyway, is the Angry Birds Transformers, or the cluster that contains the Angry Birds Transformers. And then this last one at the very bottom, Zorbiter, which contains the robotics cartoon. I think it's a movie, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And these ones over here, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So these over here, these aren't clusters. These are rather description or different names that tell you which piece of media the specific universe or the thing in question is. Actually, this will be easier to explain with the actual examples, but I'll quickly try this now. This is all of the different pieces of media within the multiverse. So anything with alpha at the end refers to a cartoon. Beta refers to tech specs. Gamma refers to comic books. Delta refers to movies. Epsilon is botcon / the convention fiction. Zeta is text stories, or like prose stories or something along those lines. Eta, that's probably not how you say that, is audio. So something like CD dramas or like audio books, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Theta is script reading. The cluster, or not cluster, the identification isn't exclusively script reading, but that's what I've chosen to go with to make it easier to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Iota is internet only information. Kappa is games, and then Lambda, I'm probably not saying that right either, refers to covers, like comic book covers or a still image, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose story pages from the Japanese continent would also fall into that identifier. So this would be mostly alternate covers and variant colors for comics. Too far. So if I go over to some examples I've pulled up, so this is basically how the identifying the different universes. So this one here, Primax 984.17 Alpha, that's the Generation 1 cartoon, specifically the American cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
And weirdly enough, I don't know why this does this, but every episode of the cartoon has its own coordinates. But most of the time, you would just, when you're referring to the universe as a whole, you would just use the first coordinates for the first episode, which is this one here. Oh, once again, I forgot the mouse isn't. Oh, I'm looking at my screen and assuming that it's matching up, but it's not. So Primax refers to the cluster it's a part of. Alpha refers to what kind of media it is. So Primax, G1, Alpha, cartoon, and then the numbers. 984.17, that's the actual date the first episode aired, which in this case is 9 is September, 84 is 1984, and then 0.17 is the 17th of that month. And you basically do this this is basically how the different comics, cartoons, games, like whatever it is, would be ordered like this. And you can technically do this with content that doesn't have an actual descriptor, because you can sort of just figure it out for yourself. Like you go, oh, this is this comic book is in the same continuity as this cartoon, so it would be gamma for comic book, and because it's connected to this cartoon, then it would be in the same cluster as that cartoon. So if you like talking about say a comic book that takes place in the G1 cartoon universe, or any G1 universe, I suppose, then you would have Primax at the start, then you would have the numbers for, I keep forgetting that the mouse isn't in the right spot,
Mm-hmm.
on the stream itself. Yeah, and then you would have like the month at the beginning, then the year, then a point, and then the day that the specific thing came out. So for over here for the comic book, I've actually used a picture of the Marvel's Generation 2 comic book, but that's in the same universe as the Marvel US comic.
Mm-hmm.
So I've used the same coordinates as that. But I will just point out that the coordinates for the G2 comic would probably be slightly different. But because it's the same universe, you just use the primary coordinates, which is Primax 984.0 Gamma. I don't know why it's a 0, because that would imply that it came out on a 0 day, which doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know why but that's what the coordinate is. I don't understand why that's the case. I believe for comics they used the cover date rather than the day it actually came out in, which sometimes is different with comics, but I guess that's just all the case with comics in general. Yeah, and then obviously Gamma at the end for the to describe what kind of media it is. It's a comic book. And then this one over here, the Transformers Cybertron or War for Cybertron game.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's a weird thing that I don't fully understand So on the Transformers wiki page, they describe the War for Cybertron game as being in the Primax Cluster, which is weird because that game takes place in the aligned continuity, so it should be a Union cluster rather than a Primax cluster. And the TF wiki tries justifying this by saying that the developers intended the War for Cybertron game to be a prequel to the cartoon, but I don't fully buy into that decision, because High Moon Studios, the developers, were approached by Hasbro to make a game tying into the aligned continuity that they were making.
Mm-hmm.
So I find it difficult to believe that this game is in the Primax cluster with the G1 cartoon. Now, you could make a case that the game could fit into the continuity of the cartoon. You may have to use a bit of headcanon to make it fit, but it could work. But given that it's not in that continuity, because it's officially not in that continuity, it's best to just not go with that. So I've actually used the coordinates for the second game, Fall of Cybertron,
Mm-hmm.
which is classified as being in the same cluster as the aligned continuity for some reason. Some of these decisions I don't fully understand, but I've just gone with the coordinates for the Fall of Cybertron game. But considering both games are in the same continuity, it's not too big. It's not too big of an issue. I've just used this name instead. So it's
Seems fair.
Union 812.21 Kappa, which refers to a game. So here's a couple of the other things that exist in the Simon cluster. So we've got Zoids, Diaclone, the Brave series, and then Stariors. I'm probably not saying that right. I'm kind of curious. Did you know about Stariors, or however you're supposed to pronounce that?
No, not at all.
Yeah, that was one of the other Takara toy lines that was brought to America. Yeah, so some of these don't have like direct connections to Transformers. Obviously, Diaclone is the most obvious one, because
Mm-hmm.
the toys that made Transformers were initially Diaclone toys that were repainted and given new identities.
Yeah.
And although Hasbro is fond of taking the original Diaclone color scheme for different characters and bringing them into Transformers as new characters, and even Takara's done that as well. Like they've taken the Masterpiece Sunstreaker toy, they've taken that and released it in red, which is the original Diaclone colors, and called it Spin Out. And Takara even added some accompanying like fiction on the bio of that toy,
Mm-hmm.
both placing it in the Japanese G1 continuity and also establishing Spin Out as an original Diaclone member from the Diaclone universe, brought
Mm-hmm.
over to the Transformers universe and turned into an actual Transformer. So you will have some instances of Diaclone character or Diaclone figures either made into new characters or actually brought over from the Diaclone universe into the Transformers universe,
Mm-hmm.
which Hasbro is actually very fond of doing currently. Because I think one of the designers at Hasbro is actually like really fond of helping collectors fill out like their mini collections. So there is enough Diaclone repaints of Transformers that you can have like your own mini Transformers Diaclone shelf now. There is also the different Diaclone reboots also exist in this cluster. Now this cluster specifically exists right on the edge of the Transformers multiverse and kind of overlapping with the Megaverse and the Omniverse and with like other stuff outside of Transformers. Obviously by virtue of the fact that it's not directly Transformers, but it is from the same company and
Sure.
yeah. So yeah, here's an image to help with the so here's some stuff in the Primax Cluster. You've got the G1 cartoon, the movie, Beast Wars and Beast Machines, Generation 2. Obviously, any Transformers fiction that continues on from an all existing fiction effectively takes place in the same cluster as it. So, the Generation 2 comic, even though it's not Generation 1, it is a continuation of it, so it still goes in the Generation 1, like Primax Cluster. And obviously you got the reboots like Dreamwave's comics and IDW's comics here. I have also used an image from the Marvel UK, specifically Time Wars. Mostly because I really like that cover for that specific volume. It is a very cool cover, just with like an insane Galvatron with half his face blown off and a time vortex behind him. And also he's attacking Power Master Optimus Prime. Yeah. Oh yeah, and also the some of the free H Productions comics. The ones I've mentioned multiple times before.
Right.
Because those ones take place in the same continuity as the G1 cartoon, they would be in this cluster as well. Obviously, you just identify them as Epsilon for convention stories. Oh yeah, and there's also an instance of like different stories taking place in the same universe, but like ended up as like fractured timelines. So like with the Wings universe that I talked about on Cultural Fortress.
Right.
Because that's not directly connected to G1, but it's rather a splinter timeline, that would still go in this cluster. It just wouldn't be directly connected to the cartoon. Yeah, so the different cluster would encompass fractured or splintered timelines as well as other universes and reboots of like different universes. Actually, I think the Dreamwave and IDW are more reboots of the comic books rather than the cartoon.
Okay.
Yeah, and then here's a better look at the actual image I've used as a thumbnail. You can actually kind of you can actually see everyone a little better.
Yeah.
This is actually from the Regeneration 1 comic, which is a continuation of the Marvel comic. Although the Regeneration 1 itself ignores the events of Generation 2, because it kind of takes the same place as a sequel to the Marvel comic.
And that bloke in the lower left-hand corner that, on the thumbnails kind of covered up by your icon, is that to scale with the guy behind him and, to his left?
Yeah, he is in scale. He's not like disproportionate. He is meant to be that small.
Gotcha.
He's because this version of Hot Rod is from the Japanese continuity. Because during the Japanese continuity, Cybertron is kind of destroyed, but not really. And Hot Rod decides to put one of the other Autobots, Fortress Maximus, put him in charge, and then Hot Rod flies off to found a new homeworld for the Cybertronian race.
Check.
And what happens is he then discovers a new planet and calls it Planet Micro, and basically founds it as the homeworld for the Micromasters in the Japanese continuity. And then at some point, Hot Rod himself downsizes his body to the size of a Micromaster. So yeah, that's why this Hot Rod is smaller, because he's from the Japanese continuity, and he's turned into Micromaster. This guy at the very center is IDW Hot Rod, and this darker colored guy, right, or not right next to him, but like sort of next to and behind him, the darker colored guy right here, that's animated Hot Rod. I think this guy directly next to IDW Hot Rod, I think that's meant to be Classics Hot Rod, because it kind of looks like that toy. But I'm not completely sure on that. There are a couple Hot Rods here who were either based on unreleased toys or are from universes that haven't actually been seen. Like this guy at the very top corner here, who looks like he has a truck coming out of his chest. Yeah, this guy up here. That looks like an unreleased toy for Hot Rod. I'm not sure if that actually is what that's meant to be, but that's what it looks like to me. And obviously this guy right behind the Micromaster Hot Rod, that's Energon Hot Rod from the Unicron trilogy. I also don't fully know who this guy is directly behind IDW Hot Rod, because the design looks familiar, but I can't put my finger on which universe he's actually from. And obviously this guy right up here, right in the corner, this purplish looking guy right up here, that's actually Generation 2 Hot Rod. Well, specifically from the Generation 2 comic. So even though that universe is kind of parallel to Regeneration 1, it still technically exists. Especially since Generation 2 is canon to the G.I. Joe Marvel comics. And the G.I. Joe comics themselves are in continuity with the main G1 US comic. In fact, IDW are currently putting out a comic book continuation of the original Marvel G.I. Joe comic. So technically that universe is still has content made for it. I'm not 100% sure what this guy right next to G2 Hot Rod and above animated Hot Rod, that's this guy right here. I think you can see the mouse where it's pointing on him. Right there. That's Hot Rod from Armada, who technically isn't a version of Rodimus or of Hot Rod. He's a separate character, but I think I know why he's here, because his visual design takes a lot of inspiration from Hot Rod to begin with. And then obviously a repaint of Hot Shot was colored in Hot Rod's colors. So I think that's possibly why he's there, despite not being a version of Hot Rod. If I do this one. No, not that one. Okay, so these two here, you may remember this one, because I talked about it when I talked about a line continuity on Cultural Fortress. So these are all the primes, and also Primus in the middle, from the aligned continuity. So there's a minor confusion with Transformers, because Primus, Unicron, and the 13 Primes, and a couple of other characters, are considered multiversal singularities. So there's only one of them in the multiverse. So basically every different interpretation of the primes that you see is all the same character. And well, before the Shroud, this was the case. I'll explain the Shroud in a minute. So right here, the Fallen right here. Before the Shroud, he was basically the same character across different media. So you would have the Fallen from Dreamwave's comics. Then he would next appear in the Revenge of the Fallen movie, and it would be the same character across both those two different medias and the two different continuities. And what ended up happening was some of the different writers would come in and write stories and either ignore the fact that they're supposed to be the same characters across different continuities, or they just didn't understand, because some writers would make a story related to a character that conflicts with what's already been done. And with this happening a couple of times, it eventually got way too complicated and too difficult to try and figure out, and the Collectors Club itself was even adding like stories trying to fix those issues. And this eventually resulted in the Collectors Club deciding to write a story called Another Light, which has an event called the Shroud in it, where basically this Prime down here in the bottom corner, the red and blue one down here, Nexus Prime, is where basically he used the Star Saber and another blade called the Terminus Blade, and he used them both to strengthen the borders between different universes and basically render multiversal singularities as separate individual beings across the multiverse, just like everyone else. And it's kind of the part that's frustrating about the Shroud is I understand the intention was to make it easier for people to understand because all they're separate characters now and they don't have to match up. They can now freely contradict each other. But the reason that was done was so Hasbro could have a little more freedom to tell whatever stories they want with these characters and not have to worry about the past rules that have been established. But what ended up happening is Hasbro hasn't actually done much with these characters. Like everything that Hasbro has done with these characters could easily fit in with the previous rules before the Shroud. So it's kind of like, why exactly did you make that decision? Because it seems to not really be necessary.
Right.
Yeah, like the different appearances of Unicron in the Transformers media after the Shroud. Mm-hmm. Most of them could actually pretty easily fit into what had previously been established about Unicron. Obviously, with the exception being Transformers: The Last Night, because that film uses Unicron the same way the Aligned continuity does. And also, there is a case for non-multiversal singularity versions of these characters to exist alongside their singularity counterparts, like the Japanese continuity. Because the Unicron in the Japanese continuity is called a Primacronian Unicron, he is actually separate from the multiverse Unicron, and that existed before the Shroud. So it's like the Shroud didn't need to happen, especially since the multiverse was kind of building to a specific conclusion as well. And yeah, the Shroud kind of disrupts that. It ends up leaving that kind of meta story off on an unsatisfying cliffhanger. Yeah. So the actual goal with the convention stories that they were telling and they were building towards was basically an event called Till All Are One, where basically all of the different universes would be merged together into one universe that has all the best aspects of all of them. I suppose the best comparison would be kind of a Crisis on Infinite Earths type story, but for Transformers. Maybe not exactly the same, but kind of the similar idea. Although in this case, the whole meta story was building to that event rather than everything getting too complicated and then management being like, okay, we need to clean this up and make it easier for people to understand what's going on. I'm pretty sure that's what Crisis on Infinite Earths, its original intention was, wasn't it?
Exactly. They just a real quick tangent.
Yep.
For DC had just gone through a period of a lot of acquisitions of other storylines.
Oh yeah, they bought the Charlton heroes.
They bought Charlton and some others too. It wasn't
just Shazam or the original Captain
Right,
Marvel.
the Fawcett comics and so forth. And they wanted to, plus they had their own internal, Earth 1, Earth 2, and they did want to streamline all of that.
Yeah.
They did a great job, but unfortunately, there was some little strands of continuity, and then over time they just kept picking at those little strands, trying to fix this and fix that, and they ended up making it worse over time.
Yeah. I believe Hawkman is kind of related to that kind of issue, isn't he?
And Hawkman actually was a great example of somebody that thought through how to get him to work, right? Because you have Earth 1 and Earth 2, where, Earth 2 takes place in like the 40s, World War II, and Earth 1 was supposed to have been the 70s, 80s, characters. Plus, they were going into a reboot where everything was going to be even more current. So this idea of one character who reincarnates over the generations that works. Wonder Woman, being somewhat immortal, could have served in World War II, come back later in World War I, so forth. There was a lot of those kinds of things. But then Superman, what do you do with Superman? Superman's not immortal. You don't want him in World War II and, having a storyline today. So these were the kinds of things that got short-sighted. It sounds a little bit like there was some thoughts of those same kinds of things in the Transformers.
Yeah. Yeah, so basically this roster right here is of the aligned continuity 13 primes, who are separate from the multiverse 13 primes, which I will point out, aligned continuity was made before the Shroud happened, so Hasbro specifically made the aligned continuity to be separate from the rest of the multiverse and not follow the rules of everything else.
Yeah.
And for the most part, everyone involved in that project cooperated with that idea. Some were a little more. Some of the companies working on that were a little more rebellious than others. So yeah, this assortment of images, or some different images that I've got here. These are the 13 primes, like the multiverse ones. The ones that exist across the multiverse as an individual person or an individual character that travels from universe to universe, rather than I think Primus is the only one who exists across the multiverse simultaneously. Because he's a god of order. He stabilizes the multiverse together. If he dies, the multiverse just falls apart. And so essentially there are some different characters here. So you have some of the same ones like Primer, Legion Maximo, the Fallen, Nexus Prime, Vector Prime, Micronus, Alchemist Prime. Onyx Prime and Solus Prime, and then Alpha Trion. Although the multiverse version of Alpha Trion is called Solomus Prime rather than Alpha Trion, but it's effectively the same person, so doesn't necessarily matter which name you use, it's the same character either way. And then you have these three images here. So this purple one here. Wait, is my mouth? Oh, it's not. Yeah, this purple one here is Epistemus. He's from the IDW comics, and he's a member of a group called the Guiding Hand, who sometimes are classified as primes and then sometimes not. Obviously, IDW comics goes more for the mythology angle rather than characters really being divine beings. But there is a version of Epistemus who is actually a prime. And then this one right here, the one with the wings pointing upwards, underneath Onyx Prime, that is Logos Prime. He's actually from the Japanese continuity. And one thing I'll say about the Japanese continuity, they are very dedicated to making sure everything fits together, and there's like filling every available slot that they can. Because like when you look at the Japanese G1 timeline, it's like very expansive, and there's multiple stories fitting into every little gap available and filling plot holes and contradictions.
Almost like they feel like if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. Can you imagine that?
Yeah. And also the Japanese fans of Transformers, they're just as much fans of continuity as they are fans of the brand itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like you have an instance like actually I'll use an example of like when the G1 or in the Japanese continuity filled in a plot hole. So in the season 3 of the original cartoon, in the American side, the character of Triptychon was constructed on Earth during season 3, which takes place in like 2006. But in the Japanese continuity, because they didn't get the movie, so they weren't aware that the events of that and season 3 take place in the future. Obviously, for the Japanese continuity, they moved it to 2010 rather than 2005. But effectively, they weren't aware of that. So when they made, before the movie came out, they made a Japanese exclusive like mini film or special called Scramble City that introduces a couple characters that would then appear in the movie in season 3. And one of the characters they introduced was Triptychon. But Scramble City takes place during the events of during like the same year that the show itself was on. So I think Scramble City was like 1986, 1985, around that time.
Mm-hmm.
And when the season 3 came out, they didn't actually change any of the stories. They just changed the year they take place in. So when it came time to give to do the episode that introduces Triptychon, they ended up with an error where they have a previous story they've already written exclusively for their markets that introduces the character decades before he actually appears, and then they have the episode that introduces him as being constructed in the time the episode takes place. So you have like this contradiction of when Triptychon was actually made, and what they did is years later, the Legends manga written by what was his name? Actually, no, I'm not going to worry about that. But the writer of the Legends manga basically took the opportunity, because the Titans Return toy line was releasing a Triptychon toy, and the Legends manga is basically meant to accompany those toys and tell a little story, tell like a short story in the instruction manual for those characters. And what the writer did for Triptychon is he actually fixed the plot hole with Triptychon by establishing that in the Japanese continuity, Triptychon was made back in the 80s, then destroyed in a battle with Metroplex, and then his memory was kept on a smaller character called Full Tilt, who was a toy that comes with Triptychon. Basically, he basically established that Triptychon's mind and memories and everything are on Full Tilt, and Full Tilt survived until the events of season 3, where the Decepticons then used him to then rebuild Triptychon on Earth in the events of the episode from season 3. So they effectively plugged that like plot hole that was accidentally created because they didn't have the movie and they didn't know, and the season 3 hadn't come out yet. There are actually other instances of the Japanese continuity kind of filling in plot holes here and there. Like Wheeljack, he dies in the events of the 86 movie, but later on in one of the Japanese cartoons, Wheeljack appears alive with no explanation. Although that was mostly because Japan didn't get the movie until after his appearance in that Japanese show. Or I think it was 1990 when Japan got that movie, and that episode of Victory that had Wheeljack came out before then, so they didn't really know that he was dead. And what they did is, I think it was like in the early 2000s, a story called Binaltech or Alternators or Alternity, which I forgot which is the actual name for the Japanese version. But in that story, they actually established that Wheeljack, after the one from the G1 cartoon died in the movie, another Wheeljack from a different universe had traveled to the G1 universe and basically took his place sometime after the real one died, and basically accounting for the fact that Wheeljack, or the Wheeljack of the Japanese timeline, was technically dead. So another one kind of came in and filled the gap.
Yeah.
So the Wheeljack you see in Victory isn't the same one you see in season 1 and 2 and the movie itself. That one is actually a separate character from a different reality who just looks very similar and basically acts the same.
Yeah.
And this one in the very bottom corner, that's... Oh, I keep forgetting the mouse isn't synced up on both screens. Yeah, so down here, there's one at the very bottom, the comic panel. That is the last Autobot from the Marvel comic, specifically the US comic. He was retroactively declared a member of the Primes. Obviously, when the Marvel comic came out, they never established him as a Prime then. But it wasn't until later on that he was then retroactively declared to be one of the primes. I believe his name is Autonomous Maximus, or you could just call him the Last Autobot, because that's what he was. That's what he was called in the comic itself.
Yeah.
I do know that there are a couple other members of the Guiding Hand from IDW that are sometimes referred to as primes as well, but it's probably best to just sort of think of them as like mythological versions of already existing primes. Yeah, so what else was it? Oh yeah, there are a couple of events that happened throughout the multiverse that are like very specific, because you have the Universe War, which is a story told in the not collectors of the 3H production comics about the Universe comics, which I have actually talked about before, or mentioned before at least, where like Unicron and Primus are bringing different characters from different universes and bringing them together and making them fight each other. And then you have what else? What other event was it? There's also the Unicron Singularity Crisis from the Cybertron cartoon. Because at the end of Energon, Unicron's body is destroyed, then his spark is thrown into an Energon sun, and then his evil corrupts it and causes it to collapse into a black hole. And him as a black hole is then threatening to consume the entire universe. And possibly the entire multiverse if it gets big enough.
Jeez,
And essentially...
that's what I call overkill. Let's really
Yeah.
make sure this guy is dead. The sun, the planets all around him are dead. Let's destroy the whole darn universe.
Yeah, and basically all different Transformers from various universes then noticed this event happening and took whatever measures they could to try and prevent the Unicron Singularity from absorbing the entire universe. I think the Autobots from the Cybertron cartoon itself searched for the Cyber Planet keys to awaken Primus and have him sort the problem out. Then you have other characters from other universes making other different decisions. Like you have one of Unicron's heralds from the Collectors Club, the Armada Ramjet figure. He, as one of Unicron's heralds, decides, well, Unicron's dying. His whole goal is to consume everything and leave it as an empty void. And Primus is the stabilizing factor of the multiverse. If we kill Primus and Unicron, then everything will die. So then Ramjet kind of has this plan of letting Unicron die while also killing Primus at the same time and causing like the entire universe to just fade away into nothing and effectively achieve Unicron's whole plan. And so while that was happening, the obviously by the end of Cybertron, Primus is woken up, and then the black hole is closed, and that whole crisis is averted. What else? What I really should have wrote down some of this beforehand. But yeah, after the Unicron Singularity Crisis, you then also have the events of Regeneration 1, which probably have an incredibly important, or probably have the most important detail for the multiverse, is that the hot rod of the Regeneration 1 comics basically cut off that universe from the rest of the multiverse. Obviously, he did this in order to save reality from a previous evil being that had appeared in the comics. Obviously, a lot of this relies on you knowing previous events and having read other stories.
Right.
Yeah. So obviously, Hot Rod cuts off the original Marvel universe, or the Regeneration 1 timeline, from the rest of the multiverse. I think it's because I know there's a theoretical point in Transformers called the 0 point, which is essentially the theoretical point when all universes are one universe rather than multiple realities. And when Hot Rod cut off a universe, or suddenly cut off a universe from the rest of the multiverse, that kind of destabilized everything a little bit. And that also fractured the 0 point as well. So obviously with that happening, then leading into the Shattered Glass universe with an evil Ultra Magnus basically invading another version of the another Splinter timeline from the Marvel Comics and completely wiping that universe out. And I think then everyone from that reality was then brought to the Shattered Glass universe. Oh yeah, I will also point out there's one part I completely forgot about. In the Japanese, one of the Japanese continuities, I think it's called the Cloud World. Mm-hmm. The Autobots and Decepticons of that world fight this sort of monster called the Hyperion, who essentially exists to devour dead universes and basically prevent the universe from being clogged with too many universes. Mm-hmm. During events of the Alternity storyline, the inhabitants of the Cloud World successfully destroy the Hyperion. It's kind of one of those instances where you understand why they want to get rid of the Hyperion, because it's deadly and it's attacking them, but at the same time it does have a higher purpose in the multiverse overall. So destroying it, even though it was for a good reason, did kind of upset the balance in the multiverse. Mm-hmm. Now dead universes won't be devoured by it. They'll just continue to build until there's a bunch of dead universes. And the destruction of the Hyperion, the shattering of the 0 point, and the destruction of one universe by the Shattered Glass, by the evil Autobots of the Shattered Glass universe, essentially results in the multiverse becoming more and more unstable, which is what leads to Nexus Prime using the Starsaber and Terminus Blade to then enact the Shroud in an attempt to try and mitigate the damage done to the multiverse that was going to get worse and worse. So, personally, I would have preferred that the Shroud not happen, because some of the different versions of Unicron and the Primes could definitely be placed in with the other versions with no real issue.
Yeah.
Yes, we have these two. Actually, don't technically need that anymore. I think that's about everything that I intended to talk about. I did notice in the chat that you mentioned about the Transformers reveals on the Pulse live stream.
Yeah,
I think it was like 2 days ago.
Well, it was over this past weekend. I think it started on Friday. There was actually.
Did you watch any of that? Or
no, I did not. I didn't at all. I really, for as far as Hasbro goes, the only thing that I really follow is the Star Wars, and I figured, rightly so, that there's plenty of other YouTube channels that would be covering that, so I could get the Cliff's Notes without actually having to attend to the virtual con in real time. And there was pathetically little that came out about Star Wars. We got a few pipeline reveals, and that's it. Yeah. And there were very few of those. I mean, there was like 2 Andor figures. The 2 figures are both protagonist characters that are from 2 very different points in the story. So it's not like these iterations of the characters overlap at any point. There's no baddie character. There's no ancillary characters. So if you were buying these figures for the purpose of, dioramas or play value or whatever, there's zero ability. It's absolutely only for collectors, and that's assuming collectors are even interested in Andor. Sorry, that's a little side tangent on Star Wars. There was a lot more reveals for Transformers, though.
Yeah, yeah, because they've released the actually this kind of somewhat ties into what we've been talking about. The current toy line that Hasbro have been releasing is the Legacy toy line,
Yep.
which specifically focuses on releasing toys from various different universes across the multiverse. So
Yeah.
you have like figures from the Unicron trilogy, or updated figures of characters from the Unicron trilogy. You have characters released from the Generation 2 line,
Hmm.
Beast Wars characters, a couple of Japanese characters as well.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to really worry about like turning this into any kind of Transformers news thing, because there are
Yeah.
plenty of other channels that do that
Sure.
already. But yeah, there definitely are some interesting reveals from the second year for Legacy. Obviously, they're subtitling it Legacy Evolutions, which I find interesting. But, well, not evolutions, but evolution.
Yeah.
Which there's a kind of an opportunity there for Hasbro to release Hearts of Steel figures, because Hearts of Steel was a subline called Transformers Evolutions and then Hearts of Steel, because Transformers Evolutions was intended to be kind of a Marvel What If style thing, or a
Right.
DC Elseworlds. And I'm just thinking, well, the current year of Transformers is subtitled Evolution, and Hearts of Steel released in a title called Transformers Evolutions. There's definitely an opportunity there to actually release something related to that. Whether Hasbro will, I have no idea.
Yeah. I also wonder. See, again, I know a lot more about the Star Wars Hasbro releases than I do about Transformers.
Yeah.
I'm wondering when Hasbro releases these things. Just I'll share the perspective from the Star Wars person's point of view.
Yeah.
Here in the States, Hasbro has a horrible distribution model, so it's almost impossible to ever find figures in the wild, so to speak, going to your local Target or whatever
Yeah.
store and finding them on pegs. The best way to get them is either directly from Hasbro Pulse, or you know other online vendors like Big Bad Toys or Entertainment
Yeah.
Earth or whatever,
Yeah, or Amazon, or
or
Capel Toys
Amazon.
in my case.
I was going to ask that. So the other thing is, I understand that a problem that I don't run into being in the States, but that a lot of countries outside the U.S. do, is that Pulse, Hasbro Pulse is exclusive. They only distribute, if it's a Pulse exclusive figure, it only goes to the States and certain others. Have you run into that with the Transformers?
There are definitely, I think, stuff like the HasLab. I know for a fact that those are only
Yeah,
available on the Hasbro Pulse website,
that's the worst.
because
Yeah,
I've not been able to find any of the HasLab stuff on any other website except Hasbro Pulse. Some
yeah.
of the other stuff I am finding on stuff like Amazon or Capel Toys or Big Bad Toy Store.
I think a lot of especially with the HasLab stuff, if you find it somewhere other than through the HasLab directly, that's a
Yep, that's a
secondary
scalper.
market thing. Yeah,
Yep,
it's a secondary market.
that's gonna be scalped to hell.
I have a video out about how we ended up getting the sail barge secondhand, and it was actually about the best deal you could ever imagine for a scalp. And I don't want to call him a scalper. It was secondary market with appropriate uptick in price, but
Yeah,
yeah, that HasLab whole thing is just the bane of collectors, and yeah,
yeah. And with some European countries don't even have Hasbro Pulse. I think it's just UK, Spain. Well, actually, they just recently expanded Pulse into other European, or some other European countries. I
yeah,
think Germany, Italy, Spain, possibly another one, or a different. I know Spain is one that they've moved to,
yeah.
but yeah, that means places like Australia and other Asian countries, and like the Asian market overall, don't have it.
Yeah.
Which is
And
kind of weird because one of the HasLab Transformers is of Star Saber, who was a Japanese exclusive character back in the day, but Hasbro Pulse isn't available over in Asia. So how the hell are they going to get a character that was made in their country?
so what ends up happening, from what I've been hearing from collectors, is they have to team up with another collector in the U.S. And if I get this thing and send it to your address, can you then forward it to me and I'll pay the shipping? And it costs a buttload of money.
Yeah.
It really is pretty savage, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not happy with Hasbro's distribution model at all.
Yeah. Actually, no, I just remembered the Shattered Glass collection that Hasbro have been doing. That is also a Hasbro Pulse exclusive, and it's not available anywhere else. And for some reason, when it comes to Shattered Glass, I don't understand why Hasbro is doing this, but they're releasing characters, but they're not using the appropriate bodies for those characters or what they actually mean. Like say Shattered Glass Megatron, the original one was a repaint of Energon Megatron, who was very visually based on G1 Galvatron, and it's like, well, you recently released an updated G1 Galvatron, so it makes sense that you would remold that guy into an Energon Megatron and color him into Shattered Glass colors. But no, they don't do that. They just take a Megatron figure and put it in Shattered Glass colors. Or probably the one that's more egregious for me personally is the Shattered Glass Ultra Magnus that they released. Instead of taking the so the original Shattered Glass Ultra Magnus was in the body was a G2 Laser Optimus figure that was repainted into Diaclone Magna, no, not Magna, Diaclone, well, a pre-Diaclone color scheme for Ultra Magnus. I think American markets refer to that as Delta Magnus. So it's like, so you have an opportunity here and then what Hasbro did during Legacy, they released an updated G2 Laser Optimus figure shortly before they revealed the Shattered Glass or Wave 2 of Shattered Glass collection. And I'm thinking, well, that's easy. Just take the G2 Laser Optimus figure you just made, give it a new head, give it the correct color scheme, and release it in the Shattered Glass collection, and then you're done. That'll be perfect. But no, Hasbro doesn't do that. Instead, they take the previously existing Ultra Magnus figure that most people agree isn't the best Ultra Magnus, is kind of definitely could be a better Ultra Magnus. Instead, they've taken that figure, colored it in the Diaclone colors like the Shattered Glass one, and given it an alternate head so that you can swap out and have it be Delta Convoy or have it be Shattered Glass Ultra Magnus. And then you could also take the armor off and have it be a Magna Convoy from the Japanese continuity.
Yeah.
So it's like a three-way figure. And I'm just thinking, well, I would have preferred it if you just took the G2 Laser Optimus, made him Shattered Glass Magnus, and then released the Delta Convoy / Magna Convoy. Have that be like a Generation Selects release, and get two separate releases instead of cramming all three of them together and getting kind of an okay double figure with like a compromised Shattered Glass version.
Yeah. Wanted to ask you too. Do you subscribe to Retro Blasting?
I'm not actually sure if I'm subscribed to him. I've definitely seen some of his videos before.
Yep.
Yeah, I've watched his video when he talked about Wheeljack because he had the Earthrise one and he had a couple others. I don't know if I've seen any of his other videos.
He doesn't do. I mean, he's pretty diverse, so he's not focused on any one particular toy line. But he's got some great Transformers videos. In fact, he's the source that I get a lot of my Hasbro knowledge about Transformers. He had
I'm not mistaken, he hasn't done that many Transformers videos, has
he
he?
hasn't, but you can go to his channel and search for Transformers and find
Yeah.
some good ones. He did some pretty scathing ones about the Unicron and about the I guess that was Marvel. It was the Marvel
The Galactus? Is that... I'm assuming you're referring to the
I don't,
HasLab stuff.
I don't
Because
think
the
it was
Unicron is a HasLab.
I don't know if it was Galactus. It
Or is
was
it
a
the
giant
Sentinel?
robot. Oh,
It
it's
was the
Sentinel.
Sentinel
That's
one.
what it was. And he was talking about the goofy knees that didn't tighten or whatever.
Yeah,
That
and
wasn't.
I think someone found like a fix that technically doesn't necessarily fix it. I think you can take like the thing off the side and
Yeah.
tighten the bolt, but then
Yeah.
that kind of runs the risk of causing damage later down the line, so it's probably not best to do that.
And that's
That's more of a
exactly
short-term
what he
fix.
talked about. He's like, for the price that you're paying for this thing, you should not have to do that ever. You know?
Yeah.
So but yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
I
would
missed
recommend
my opportunity to get the HasLab Unicron, so I don't have him.
Yeah.
Kind of a shame. There are other Unicrons that were released before him. They're not
Yeah.
as big as he is, but I mean, I could probably try and get one of the releases of the Armada Unicron toy.
I mean, in a way, you're probably better off not having that big thing. You've only got so much space, you know.
Yeah, and especially since I already have a big Transformer in my room. If I
Yeah.
rotate the camera, him right there. Oh wait, you can't see him because it's dark in here. There we go.
There you
I already
go.
have a Titan class figure.
Yeah.
That is specifically the Earthrise Titan class Scorponok. I don't have the old Titans Return Fortress Maximus, both because that's too expensive, and also because I don't know where I would put him. Because
Yeah.
I'd want to put him next to Scorponok to go with the whole evil headmaster, good headmaster. But as you can see, if I maneuver this around, you can see I kind of have space to work out currently at the moment, so I can't really have like a second one of him or any
Sure.
other figure the same size. As much as I want the Black Zarek repaint of this guy, I don't quite have the space for it right now.
Sure.
Yeah, I think I only paid like somewhere just over £100 for that guy. Because I got that guy from Kapow Toys, who charge the price that it's worth rather than scalping it.
Yeah.
And on Kapow Toys, it was like 150 or 160, something like that. And I did save up the money in order to get him. I didn't like just impulse buy him.
That's for the best.
Yeah. I also. Oh yeah. You can see my cat on the bed.
Yep.
If I kind of rotate. Oh no, you can do that. Right down there. There's my movie movie and TV show collection.
Yep.
I have them ordered in piles of like what decade they came from. So these two short ones at the front, that's the 80s and 90s pile. Then directly behind them is the 2000s, and then behind them is the 2010s. And as you saw, these guys down here, they're the mixed pile. So you got one pile down here that's like made up of collections that contain movies from the 80s and 90s. So I think the bottom pile is the 70s 80s pile, so that's containing films that are from both the 70s or collections with films from the 70s 80s. And then on the top is the 80s 90s, so films from or collections of films from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
That's basically how I've ordered my collection, where I've got the main decades of individual films there that were in specific decades, and then the collections that can go across multiple decades are in a separate pile down here. If I actually, since I can freely move around a little easier here, I'm going to quickly show some of the newer Transformers stuff that I've got on, because obviously that video, that little introduction at the beginning, only showed what I had when I made that. So So here's the Transformers Armada video game on PS2, and you'll notice that the PS2 games, this is actually a UK thing where it's just a white banner with the name. In America, they actually have artwork here. Well, that's why you don't really know much about that, because you're not really a gamer.
Right.
I suppose Boomer would actually understand or know that a little more than...
Probably.
I also have the Revenge of the Fallen game on Xbox 360. Oh wait, I just... Yeah. And the Dark of the Moon game as well. Actually, this game is unique because it's a prequel to the movie, although it's not in continuity with the comic book prequel to the movie, which is slightly odd. I guess that's just another instance of different media not quite lining up. I also have Rise of the Dark Spark on PS4. This game's not quite the best, but it is very important to the universe overall. Because this is a crossover between the Cybertron games and the Bayverse films, and this game basically explains how the aligned continuity kind of connects back to the rest of the multiverse. Well, gives an explanation, while also introducing a mysterious new object called the Dark Spark that has no origin. Although the Ars Vector Prime Facebook group did theorize on a couple origins for it, but none of them were confirmed to be correct. So it's best to just assume, or I suppose just go with whichever theory you specifically feel like makes more sense. Yeah. I personally go with the theory that the Dark Spark is related to Unicron, because the Dark Spark itself is kind of a dark doppelganger of the Matrix.
Yeah.
And it spreads dark energon everywhere, and dark energon is Unicron's blood in the aligned continuity. And also Unicron has made himself like a dark Matrix already in previous stories, so it makes sense for that to be the case. No, please don't fall over. I also bought a bunch of comics. So here's the prequel for the first 2007 movie. There's one of the tie-in stories for Revenge of the Fallen. Here's the first IDW story, Infiltration. The second story, Escalation. And then here's the Energon comic. This only collects the first 5 issues of the Energon comic. And weirdly enough, there are no... there's like one other trade that also collects the Energon comics, but for some reason it like doubles the issues for some reason. So this one goes from issues 19 to 23, and then a second volume, which is kind of rare and difficult to find, collects issues 23 to like 20, 26, 28 or 29, I think. Which I find odd why they didn't just have it be volume or issue 24 to 28 or 29. Because the Energon comic only went to issue 30. Although I do have the individual issue 30 in a short box over there. Jesus Christ, there's so much weight on these shelves. I feel like I'm going to topple the shelf over every time I move these. What else was there? I don't know if I'm going to be able to... I don't know quite if I'll reach back here, but give it a try anyway. Ooh, actually, if I do this... Oh, there it goes. There goes the headphone. I almost made it. I just about made it. Yeah, so I recently got the 2 seasons of Beast Machines. This is not the Shout Factory release. This is the older release. What company put this out?
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, it doesn't say what company put it out. Yeah, this is the original UK release. I think this literally has the individual volumes. I haven't watched any of this yet though. So I'll worry about sorting these out later. So there is more stuff that I have that I just haven't mentioned yet, but oh well, you can see them right there. Yeah, so it's about everything. Yes, hello Tego, I heard you. What are you doing? Okay. Well, okay, well, while he cleans himself, there anything that you specifically wanted to add?
No, I think that was a very interesting talk, and I think I learned a lot.
Yep. I'm not 100% sure how much of this will actually stick, though.
No, yeah, you're right. It's challenging, but you
Yeah.
know, it exposes me to it, and you know, anyone who stops by to watch the stream in the future also.
Yeah. There is also a specific YouTube channel that I have been watching who has kind of helped with understanding a lot of this. If I can find the channel, because it's a channel called Commander Radix, who is one of the YouTubers who actually talks about this sort of stuff and like goes in depth with this, and doesn't disregard or look down on any specific elements.
Yeah.
He doesn't do what the Transformers Wiki guys do and like look down on specific elements they don't particularly like. Because the Commander Radix channel, he does try to be like he does try to be what's the word he does try and be unbiased when talking about this stuff. If I can find it, you know what? I'll just do this. So what I'll do is I shall, when I can find his channel, I will put it in the description. So I do recommend everyone for like, because he does sort of go into this obviously in smaller videos. He doesn't do it all like in big one chunk. He does do individual bits, or talks about all this sort of thing in individual sections. Where the hell is it? Okay, this is a problem we run into when I'm subscribed to way too many channels.
I have a lot of subscriptions myself. I'm actually really glad you added the Gladiator of Chaos to your name, because it's really hard to find one Matt Flynn in a list of Matt Flynns. It's like trying to find a needle in a stack of needles.
Oh yeah, the Commander Radix channel, he does also do videos on history as well.
Mm-hmm. That's probably where I heard of him, because I know that name sounded familiar to me.
If I can, Jesus Christ, where the hell is the video? I could have sworn that it wasn't that long ago that he uploaded a history video, because those are the two main things videos he'll put out. A video talking about something related to Transformers, and then another video with like him talking about like him doing like an overview or like talking about history or a specific historical event, something like that. Okay, you know what? I'm literally scrolling here through page after page. I'm just gonna go to the MeWe like the MeWe group, because I did share one of his
Oh,
videos.
there you go. Yeah, that's probably where I saw it then. Yeah.
I have shared some of his Transformers videos. Okay, here it is. This isn't the video. Well, I didn't want to specifically share the video, but this does get me to his actual. This does actually get me to the chat, to his channel.
Yeah.
Here we go. Now I can share the. Now I can share the channel. Let's put it. Paste. There we go. I've shared it in the chat on the YouTube.
There we go.
Yeah, so there are some details that he talks about that aren't the video itself doesn't have the title of the specific thing he talks about, because some of the videos he does is where he's talking about multiple topics in one video, so he'll have like one specific topic be the title of the video, but then other topics within the video when you watch it. So that ends up resulting in me trying to figure out a specific part of Transformers, and I'm going, okay, so he did a video on this topic. It's like, but I'm not finding it when I type it into the actual thing. So I'm like, maybe he didn't title the video about that thing, but that thing was in a video with a different title. And I'm like, but I don't remember that other title or what other video it was in. So I was like, then I don't know where it is. No, leave the poster alone, Tigger. Just point him out in the corner of my eye there. That's it. Come this way. But don't step on the DVDs and games. he does like to do that. Because they're right there and I haven't put them... I don't have another shelf for them yet. Okay, you're going to stand on those comics that I've left right there. And rub your face on that part. Because this bed was part of a bunk bed, so it's like this is right here that connects to the top bunk.
Oh, okay.
I still have to... well, actually, no, I'm not going to replace this. I'm just going to disassemble this bed eventually and have this room be an office space rather than a bedroom.
Sure.
Because the other bedroom in the house is empty because both my sisters have moved out. And so I'm going to have my bedroom be that room and then this be an office room. And just have more shelves in here so I can actually put these up somewhere.
Yeah.
And now the cat is staring at me as if I'm crazy.
Which you may be.
He doesn't know that I'm talking to you through the computer.
Right.
And the microphone. He just sees me sitting in front of a microphone talking to myself.
Right, exactly.
Okay, well, with not much more to say because we're really just rambling now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let the Matrix light your darkest hour till all are one. Bye.
Cheers, everyone.